Last year, Microsoft introduced a service called Xbox Game Pass, and it has had quite an exciting life so far. We have seen it grow from something extra to something everyone should take notice of. But what has happened and what is its place when it comes to Xbox? Will Xbox Game Pass become something even bigger than it currently is? There are certainly some things happening right now that hint towards that kind of future. For example, why did Microsoft release a new app called Xbox Game Pass for iOS and Android? Is there something else that they're planning to use it in the future? And why has Microsoft suddenly become so serious about Xbox? I'm Oscar Serikti from the Interactive Vision, and let's find that out. If you didn't know, Game Pass is a subscription service where you download games that are on the subscription straight to the console, and this is what makes it so great, but is also its shortcoming at the moment. One of the biggest benefits of playing straight from the console is the fact that you don't need to have a quick internet connection all the time, and companies don't need to have multiple servers around the world, so the service can be available in a lot of countries. Because on a cloud streaming service, the server has to be close to the player to reduce latency. But the problem arises for download-based systems when you don't have motivation to wait for the download to finish. However, Xbox is constantly trying to improve this, as they have just released a new feature called Fast Start. Fast Start is interesting in that it uses machine learning to first download the most important files first, and then allow you to play the game before it has even completely finished the download. They said it would increase download speeds by 2 times, but it's not yet fully implemented to the console. Even the UI of Xbox One is being changed to help the discoverability of games on Game Pass. For example, the new tab on the UI really made it more visible and easier to find games that are on the service. Improvements like these are huge steps towards Xbox's plan to make Xbox Game Pass the central part of the whole ecosystem. But what defines a subscription service is content, and in the beginning Game Pass did lack some big caliber games, but that's something they've also constantly improved. The biggest improvement happened earlier this year when they announced that every Microsoft Studios title will be coming to Game Pass at launch, so games like Halo, Gears, Forza and others will be coming at launch to the service. The first game coming at launch was Sea of Thieves from Rare, and it was a big success, having about 5 million players since launch. And later we saw State of Decay 2 from Undead Labs, which has now got about 3 million players. These numbers are encouraging for Xbox, and even though people predicted that a Game Pass would kill the sales of those titles, we have seen that the results aren't that black and white. We don't know how many of those players are from Game Pass and from retail, but we can see from the NPD and other sales reports that especially Sea of Thieves has done quite well on retail, which is quite contrary to some retailers saying that Game Pass would outright kill retail. But to be honest, retail seems to be dying anyway, and why should we hold progress just because of sticking to the past? Some also predicted that Game Pass would devalue games, but we haven't really seen any big changes. Like most games that launch on Game Pass still cost the regular amount on the store. For example, Forza Horizon 4 has a price range of 70 euros to 100 euros on different editions, and for me that doesn't seem any cheaper than before. Yes, State of Decay 2 did cost 30 euros, but that game didn't really have the biggest of budgets, so that is more of an exception, and I don't think that price point has anything to do with Game Pass. Game Pass has also more than just Xbox exclusives. It has over 100 other games that move from independent games to AAA third-party stuff. Some big companies like Bethesda have already embraced Game Pass, as we have seen with games like Fallout 4, Doom and The Elder Scrolls Online coming to the service. This partnership could grow in the future, and we could one day see some Bethesda's games coming to Game Pass the same day they launch. However, this seems quite unlikely to happen at the moment. Maybe Bethesda is more interested on bringing life to old games. Bringing life to old games is also one benefit and way to use Game Pass, as it allows companies like Bethesda, for example, to earn extra revenue from games that have already been out for a while, and those games can get new fans and get back into the minds of old fans. This is good for the whole industry, as we should always remember and look back to the old games and learn from them to make the future of interactive experiences even better. Being excited about new stuff is great, but we shouldn't stop talking about old games. Some independent developers have embraced Game Pass too, and we have also seen some independent games launching on day one like Graveyard Keeper, Laser League, Warhammer Vermintide 2 and the soon long awaited Ashen. This trend could have interesting results, and it could give indie developers a great avenue for visibility when usually they must hope people would take a risk and buy their games. Game Pass will give people access to the game and developers get revenue from that. Streamers will, thanks to this, stream it on platforms like Mixer, YouTube and Twitch. That will lead to more people talking about the game, which will lead to more sales of the game. Getting more recognition is what every independent developer wants, as if no one knows about your game, no one will buy it. It's usually what makes or breaks a game's success. The only shortcoming that I can think of for indie devs is that it's fairly hard to get your game on Game Pass and will require quite a high quality game, so this isn't a solution for everyone. Xbox is talking more and more about Game Pass, as we have seen how the marketing and importance has changed. Last year when Game Pass was released, it felt like it wasn't that important for Microsoft, as there was no presence of the service at conventions like E3, but this has been changing since the announcement of Xbox exclusives launching day one on Game Pass. After that, Game Pass has been at a big center stage at the world's biggest gaming conventions, E3 and Gamescom. Nowadays there are more commercials and much more talk about it than before, and recently Xbox Game Pass just got its own Twitter account, which means that they are serious about it, because they don't create new Twitter accounts that often. By the way, I highly recommend you to check it out, as the account is quite funny. It has become clear that Microsoft is serious about Xbox Game Pass, and the service is starting to feel more and more like its own brand, which could indicate something about the future. But why does Microsoft believe so much in Game Pass? And isn't it far better for them that people are paying a full price for games? Well, the thing is that some of those people who are already buying those games will still buy these games, but those who are not sure about paying upfront or aren't even that interested in it can now play with the subscription, and that's why it's so beneficial for everyone. It gives an option for people and developers so anyone can play the games they want. And the fact that more people are now playing will bring even more people, which will lead to more conversations about the game, which will lead to more people joining Game Pass or buying the game. This cycle benefits every game on the platform. One problem Xbox has had for a while now is trying to sell new exclusive games, as we have seen with games like Quantum Break, Sunset Overdrive and ReCore. These games have struggled heavily when it comes to sales numbers, but as we know, some old series always do well, like Halo, Forza and Gears. People have demanded for a while now that Xbox would get new IPs and more single-player experiences, but it seems that Xbox players just don't care about anything else than those old classic franchises. This, however, looks to be changing, as we have seen Sea of Thieves do well thanks to Game Pass. How well would it have fared if it wasn't on Game Pass? The launch could have been damaging, considering that the game is meant to be a service that will live for a while, and some criticized that the game had limited amount of content at launch. But what about single player experiences? Could Game Pass make Xbox players interested in those types of games? I think the problem has been in the past that trying to sell €70 games that have about 10 hours of gameplay is hard for those who are used to playing long games and games that have a long lifetime. And as a lot of people know, Xbox's identity has always been about multiplayer games, and the player base has usually bought Xboxes for multiplayers and Xbox Live. But thanks to Game Pass, multiplayer fans might finally want to try more story-driven games, because they can get them with a subscription without any risk, and I think they will love them, as everyone loves a good story. One another thing that encourages Microsoft to invest in new studios and new IPs is the fact that they now have a steady stream of revenue, and this pretty much reduces the risk from making new and innovative games. And they pretty much have to invest in first party content now if they want to make Game Pass more popular and most importantly for them to earn more revenue from it, as we know how Netflix is investing in their own content to reduce the amount they have to pay to third parties. Because just relying on others' content doesn't usually work that well for subscription services, like for example Spotify, who has struggled for a while now to turn profit. Also, exclusive content is what gives a service an identity. When people think of Netflix, they think of House of Cards and Stranger Things, for example. As we saw at E3, Microsoft has finally become serious about Xbox, investing heavily on old and new and single and multiplayer games. We saw how much the production values have improved on the new Halo, Forza and Gears. When it came to new things, Xbox came in swinging. They announced 5 new first-party studios, that's almost double the amount of studios Xbox had before the announcement. The head of Xbox, Phil Spencer, has even hinted that there might be even more studios coming in the future. On an interview, the head of Microsoft Studios, Matt Booty, commented on what kinds of studios they are interested in. He said that, quote, "We will have an interest in studios right now that fit this criteria of 50 to 100 people who are making games on a 2 to 3 year cadence and have content that we think will be of interest to our Game Pass subscribers. That means content that is a little different to what our big AAA franchises can deliver." End of quote. This interview proves that Microsoft is focused on Game Pass and they have a plan on bringing more people to the service. Their plan is that big games like Forza, Gears, Halo and whatever new they have in the works right now will bring people to the service, and these smaller scale games that are made by Compulsion Games and Ninja Theory, for example, will keep people subscribed to it. These smaller scale games are expected to innovate and take bold risks. The fear that Microsoft would only focus on online games isn't that relevant anymore, because why would they acquire Ninja Theory, as they pretty much only make single player games, and Microsoft has clearly stated that these studios will have complete freedom on making games. Xbox has clearly started to matter more for Microsoft. The CEO of Microsoft, Satya Nadella, just last year promoted Phil Spencer to the main board to have a say about the future of the company. This is a huge change because in the past the head of Xbox had to always talk through someone to get a voice in the company, and now Xbox is treated at the same level as the giants like Office, Surface, Windows and other big parts of Microsoft. This is one of the reasons why we saw Phil Spencer openly declare at this E3 that, quote, "You will always be able to play on Xbox," end of quote. The reason why this is such a huge statement is because, as we know, Xbox has had quite a lot of past mistakes, like the infamous Red Ring of Death that cost the company billions of dollars, and the disappointing launch of Xbox One, and the fact that Xbox has never really generated that much revenue for Microsoft compared to Windows and Office, for example. These are some of the reasons why some investors have suggested that Xbox should be discontinued. Luckily, Phil and the team has since been able to change the course of Xbox to the better. But is Microsoft this excited about the current state of Xbox Game Pass? I don't think entirely, because one of the biggest disadvantages it has when comparing to other subscription services is the limited user base that is fraction of the amounts, for example, Netflix and Spotify can have on PC, mobile, consoles and so many other devices. Game Pass is only on Xbox One, which has sold, according to some analysts, about 35 million consoles, and compare that to the amount that are on other platforms combined, which is in billions. Even though Xbox has tried to make the consoles more accessible with the new service called Xbox All Access, which offers an Xbox One console, Xbox Live Gold and Xbox Game Pass for a monthly price without any extra costs, that is paid in 24-month period. This will 100% help get more people on Xbox One, but it still won't change the fact that they need more to become something huge. Well, I think Microsoft has a plan. I envision that in the future we will see that Game Pass will be expanded. Recently Microsoft released an interesting app on iOS and Android dedicated for Xbox Game Pass. At the moment it's meant for scrolling through games and downloading them to the console. But I think we will see this app expanded even more with cloud streaming. We know that they announced that they are working on cloud streaming at E3, and I think Game Pass would be a perfect place to utilize it at first, because it's clear that they won't be able to support every game on Xbox at launch, so it would make sense to prioritize Game Pass games. This would be a huge thing, as it would allow you to use the service anywhere with almost any device. We could finally play console quality games on the go with a phone. This is exciting because people want to play wherever they go, as we have seen how successful Nintendo Switch is and how popular mobile games are. It's pretty clear people want that. This could also be the way Game Pass reaches PCs, because I don't know how they could make Game Pass fully available on PC, because they would have to make a different game lineup for PC and Xbox, and I don't think that would be a good idea. Phil Spencer has, however, stated multiple times that he would like to see Game Pass fully on PC. But Game Pass does already allow you to play on PC with Xbox Play Anywhere. For example, if you are subscribed to Game Pass and the game supports Play Anywhere, you can download it on PC and play it on PC. So Game Pass does work on PC if only every developer supported Play Anywhere. Game Pass offers a lot of value for developers and players, and especially Microsoft, and it will be exciting to see how the next generation of Xbox will affect the service. Game Pass is getting massive momentum behind it, and it will be interesting to see how these new studios affect the future of Game Pass, and what will happen when Xbox's biggest character, Master Chief, joins Game Pass with the upcoming installment with Halo Infinite. And how will Game Pass improve and grow in the future? The next few years will be massive for Xbox and could shape the whole gaming industry. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to the Interactive Vision to see more of my future content. This is my biggest project I've ever done, so I hope you could leave a like and a comment on this video. And don't forget leaving constructive feedback, as I constantly want to improve and make better content.